Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of Bronx Bombers. My name is Joe Rubenstein and it is Monday, September 17th, and the Yankees, heading into this series against the Red Sox, J-Happ on the mound tomorrow against Nathan Eovaldi, have now lost 4 out of their last 5 series. 4 of those losses came to teams with losing records. The Tigers and the White Sox at home, Twins on the road, and the Blue Jays again back at home. So since the All-Star break, the Oakland A's, a team with a payroll of $80 million, who the Yankees will face in a wild card game 2 weeks from Wednesday, have a record of 35-18 for a .660 win percentage. The Tampa Bay Rays, with the lowest team payroll in baseball at $68 million, have a record of 33-19 since the break for a .635 win percentage, and the Yankees, with a payroll of $192 million, so $44 million more than the A's and the Rays combined, have a record of 29-27 for a .517 win percentage. But, Aaron Boone tells us that this is an elite ball club, and, he's really good with the media. So everything's cool, right? You can follow us on Twitter at Bombers Podcast is the handle. You can also send us questions. We'll try to answer each and every week in our mailbag segment here on the podcast. You can like us on Facebook, subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher. We're on Spotify as well. Or give us a call, 646-854-4959. And as always, you can send your comments and questions to joe at bronxbomberspodcast.com. Really, however you'd like to engage with us, we love engaging with you. Coming up a little bit later on in our Twitter poll this week, some interesting results when we asked who should win the American League Manager of the Year award, and I'll answer a fascinating question from one of our followers, actually 2 questions. First, about home field in the wild card game and if that matters, and also whether our dismal September performance will matter or not, and we'll take a hard look at the current state of the Yankees. Spoiler alert! It's not good, and as usual, we'll pull no punches whatsoever. All that and more coming up on today's Bronx Bombers. Back in a moment.
Bronx Bombers Trivia. Which of these Yankees holds the highest season batting average in franchise history at .393? Is it A, Babe Ruth, B, Lou Gehrig, C, Joe DiMaggio, or D, Paul O'Neill? The answer coming up a little bit later in the podcast.
And now here's Joe with this week's main thing.
It was a tough Sunday in New York. 4 of our professional sports teams played and all 4 lost. Jets, Giants, Mets, Yankees. I mean, thank God the NBA and the NHL haven't started yet, or it would have been 6. Because I have no faith whatsoever that the Knicks and Rangers are going to be any good either. And, as I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, I am so sick of Boone's just delusional post-game comments that I've stopped watching them. But being on Twitter, I can't help but see a few here and there. They kind of sneak into my feed. And recently I saw that he said to Michael Kay, all I want to be is authentic. That's what he said. All I want to be is authentic. First of all, coming from the manager of the New York Yankees, what the hell does that even mean? I mean, all you should want is to win, period. And number 2, why are we even talking about you? Nobody cares about you personally. Believe it. Nobody cares about you or what you want or how you want to be perceived. All they care about is the fact that this team is playing terrible baseball, terrible, and losing to bad teams, just utterly stymied by schlock, no-name pitchers on a regular basis. Literally, at this point, it's the new normal to go out there and fail miserably against pitchers that no one has ever heard of. So you got your wish, Boone. You're authentic. You are authentically mediocre, with the lion's share of this roster that was here under Girardi just underperforming this season. My God, I mean, everyone kept saying how likable this guy was, how likable Aaron Boone was, and I can't stand him. After Boone's inevitable termination before his contract elapses, I literally want Cashman to go out there and find the most unlikable guy in the world who's absolutely terrible with the media, who just barks at everybody in sight and has actual experience and knows how to win. And I said this on Twitter, Aaron Boone's PR strategy is very clear. Stay relentlessly positive no matter how crappy this team plays. So if they turn it around, he'll take the credit for being such a positive guy, and if they don't, which is likely, he'll blame the injuries and just count on his flunkies in the media to cover for him. I mean, can you imagine if Joe Girardi had the kind of summer that Aaron Boone has had here, what the media would have done to him? They would have roasted him on a spit. I mean, it's incredible, the pass that this guy has gotten from the media. Truly incredible. It's like total journalistic malfeasance. I mean, where is Michael Kay on this? He comes on like some kind of truth-telling tough guy, but when it comes to our delusional manager, he's just nowhere to be found. I mean, I understand that as an employee of the Yes Network, which is owned by the Yankees, he knows where his bread is buttered. He's not going to want to badmouth the product. He's a quasi-salesman, really, and the Yankees have a long history of getting rid of announcers who are, even remotely tough on the team. But how about just some mild criticism now and then for appearance's sake, I mean, did you hear what Boone said after that loss to Minnesota? This was after that last game where we were one hit by, Hall of Fame non-candidate Jake freaking Odorizzi. He said, what did he say? There were a few of them, a few zingers here. Okay, yeah. Our intent was really good. Great. So was Mussolini's, for God's sake. And then here, we're making good swings. Yeah, sure. They're missing the ball, but we're making good swings. I mean, this is probably going to sound terrible, but I'm going to follow the manager's lead here and be authentic. Since there's no way in hell I see us getting by Boston in the first round, if losing the wild card game would get Boone and this entire coaching staff fired, that would be worth it to me. Oh yeah, and there was one other thing he said after Minnesota. He said he loved the exit velocity on some of the outs. The exit velocity. That's what he loved. The only exit velocity I'm interested in right now is how fast we can get this guy exited out of New York. This is absolutely one of the most disastrous decisions of Brian Cashman's tenure, right up there with the Ellsbury deal, in my opinion. I mean, you took a team on the cusp, led by a very competent guy, Joe Girardi, and handed it over to this grinning clown with zero experience. I mean, what was he thinking? What the hell was he thinking? I mean, for all the big deal the Yankees have made about staying under the luxury tax threshold, patting themselves on the back over that, they do in fact have a payroll of $192 million. And boy, do they not look it. And I don't want to hear about injuries. I mean, yes, injuries have played a part. They have hurt us, especially Judge. But this is about much more than one player. I mean, look at the pitching, where the loss of Judge had no impact. Since he's been out, the collective ERA of our pitching staff is 4.31, and the rest of our vaunted lineup, all healthy, is hitting .235. Pathetic. Strikeout after strikeout after strikeout, especially with runners in scoring position. I mean, you got men on base, and you see Stanton or Gary Sanchez stroll up to the plate. Forget it. It's over. It's over before it starts. Guaranteed strikeout. Throw in horrendous defense, basic fundamentals at just a little league level, bullpen just coughing up leads left and right. And meanwhile, the Red Sox, whose magic number is 1, will celebrate yet another division championship at Yankee Stadium this week, almost certainly, unless we sweep them, which we're not going to do, which is exactly what this team and this manager and the general manager and this owner deserves. I mean, that's another thing people in sports media are always talking about, optics. I mean, how do you like those optics? Huh? The freaking Red Sox popping champagne in the Bronx in mid-September. I mean, I'll be posting that video on Twitter, believe me. And if it was up to me, the entire Yankee organization would have to watch that video on like a 10-hour loop with their eyes taped open like Malcolm McDowell in freaking Clockwork Orange, okay? And getting back to Boone, I mean, is there a single young player, even one, on this team who has not regressed under his leadership? I mean, I can think of 2 offhand, a grand total of 2 players who have not regressed: Austin Romine and Didi Gregorius. Everyone else, Sanchez, Bird, Judge, Hicks, Sonny Gray, certainly, Green, Canely, and that's just off the top of my head. I'm not even reading those off a list. All of those performances have dropped, in some cases dramatically. I mean, when we got bumped off last year by Houston, there was this silver lining there that at least we had a solid young core. Well, that core, to a large extent, seems to be melting, and there's just a ton of question marks on this roster heading into the offseason. And again, that was part of the rationale for Aaron Boone, that this happy, smiley, feel-good guy was going to go over better with the kids. Newsflash, it hasn't. And the veterans haven't exactly performed either. I mean, Stanton with his 199 strikeouts, David Robertson's regressed, Sabathia can't get anybody out, and there's others too. So, I mean, if you're not judging your manager on what he gets out of of his players, then what the hell are you judging him on? His smile? And it's not just the manager. Some of the comments I've heard from the players after these losses to terrible teams have just absolutely bewildered me. I mean, first of all, they all claim to have no idea what the standings are. Just don't follow the standings. They don't even look. Well, maybe you should start. And you hear remarks like, that's baseball, or we had some good swings, or, Greg Bird's, he had that chestnut. What did he say? Happy to be playing at all. Well, he isn't playing anymore, thank God. And Sonny Gray, after his one good start of the season against AAA Baltimore, saying he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, I can't listen to it. I can't. They don't play the game the right way, and from all appearances, they could not care less. You remember that scene in Moneyball where Brad Pitt just goes nuts after a loss and takes a bat and smashes like the clubhouse boombox to pieces because the team is not, upset? Somebody needs to do that with this team daily. And apparently, with George Steinbrenner in the ground, nobody is up to the task. Nobody. You got to be nice, got to be good with the media. That's what's important. Tell more lies to the fans about how we're elite, a beast in the making. I paused the television on the shot of the dugout after that loss to Toronto on Sunday. You know what I saw? Nothing. No fire. No anger, no urgency, no emotion of any kind, just nothing. And so the decade marches on, a decade that could very well be our first since the Babe Ruth era without a single World Series appearance. Back in a moment.
And now the answer to today's Bronx Bombers trivia question. Which Yankee holds the highest season average in franchise history at .393? The answer? A. Babe Ruth. And now here's Joe with this week's Twitter poll.
Yes, this week's Twitter poll results are in. We asked you this. Who should be the American League Manager of the Year? And 41% of our followers on Twitter at Bombers Podcast said Kevin Cash of the Rays. 29% said Alex Cora of the Red Sox. 24% said Bob Melvin of the Oakland A's. And 6% said Aaron Boone of the Yankees, which honestly I'm surprised anyone voted for that. I kind of added that as a joke, but I can't think of a single reason why Boone should be considered for this award, or in fact why he deserves to return as manager at all. But I think in general awards are silly, and this award, like many others, is often awarded to the wrong people for the wrong reasons, because the Baseball Writers Association of America, who votes on it, looks at won-loss record a lot of the times and not which manager got the most out of what they had on their roster that season. Now last year I think they got it right. I think they in giving it to Paul Molitor of the Twins, that team only won 85 games. But in the history of the award, which the baseball writers have been giving since 1983, only 5 managers have won while leading a team that finished outside the top 2 spots in their division. Buck Rogers with the Expos back in the 80s, Tony Pena in 2003 with the Royals, Buck Showalter when he was in Texas in 2004, Joe Madden 3 years ago, and then Girardi when he was with the Marlins in 2006. That Marlins team actually finished 4th in a very strong NL East that year, but they had the lowest payroll in baseball and drastically exceeded expectations, staying in the wild card race into September, using primarily rookies and low-cost veterans. So to me, that was a great job by the baseball writers as far as overlooking the final standings and seeing a guy in Girardi who got more out of less, as opposed to what we've seen from Boone this year, who's getting less out of more. So this year, as great as the Red Sox have been, and they have been, it's one of the most explosive offenses, particularly the top of the lineup that we've seen in a while. But look, they also have the highest payroll in baseball, and it's not even close. People are always saying the Yankees, by their talent, the Red Sox payroll this year is over $228 million. The next closest is the Giants with $205 million, and the Red Sox payroll is $36 million higher than the Yankees. So I'm not knocking Alex Cora. He's done a good job, but that's certainly not a case of doing more with less. He's doing more with more. But the 2 guys who I think should be the finalists for this award have indeed done more with less. Bob Melvin of the A's, who the A's have the 3rd lowest payroll in baseball at just under $72 million, so less than a third of the Red Sox payroll, and they've got a winning percentage of .604, 4th best in the majors. And Kevin Cash of the Rays, who has even less to work with. Tampa has the lowest payroll in baseball at $68 million. And yes, they sit in third place behind the much wealthier Red Sox and Yankees, but their winning percentage of .551 is better than 5 of the 10 teams with the highest payrolls in baseball. That .551 win percentage is better than the Giants, Dodgers, Nationals, Angels, and Cardinals, all in the top 10 of payroll. And so even though I have a feeling Bob Melvin is going to win this award, and I basically have no problem with that, I'd personally give it to Kevin Cash. On top of getting results with the lowest payroll in the league, first of all, we've seen Tampa sweep the Red Sox, they swept the Yankees, and they swept the Astros. And they've done that and more using 20 rookies this season. That's a club record, and third most in the bigs behind the Angels and the Marlins. Both of those teams performed far worse than Tampa this year. And beyond that, the 20 rookies that Tampa has used have played for more games than either of those two teams. Tampa rookies have combined for 527 games, so far more than LA or Miami, and their rookie pitchers have combined for 430 innings, again, far and away the most in the American League. I mean, since starting spring training, the Rays traded away a dozen veterans at least, and some of the better ones include Jake Odorizzi, Denard Span, Steven Souza Jr., Nathan Eovaldi, Chris Archer, and Hechavarria. But most of all, I've loved the creativity that Kevin Cash and Tampa management has brought to the game with their concept, really two concepts. Number one, the bullpen day, and number two, the concept of the opener, having a closer pitch the first inning of the game, usually Sergio Romo. Both of those approaches, relieve stress on their starters, and I think it's going to catch on. We saw Oakland do it successfully against us a few weeks ago, but since Tampa started utilizing those two techniques in May, they rank second in the American League in ERA at 3.39. That's incredible. And before that, they were ninth at 4.43. So there you have numerical proof of a revolutionary concept in 2018 that works. And again, I think it's going to catch on. Think of how many pitchers have needed Tommy John over the past few years. And I mean, this just radically reduces stress on arms. Rays relievers have now thrown 613 innings this season. The next closest is the Padres at 490. And the Rays starters have pitched far fewer innings, far fewer than any other team. So, as Mike Lupica wrote last week, this is not a baseball team, it's a science experiment, and a successful one at that. And Kevin Cash is the guy who's made it work. He's gotten amazing results with creativity and smarts, again, with the lowest payroll in baseball. So if I was voting, I'd give AL Manager of the Year to Kevin Cash. All right, from this week's mailbag, our question of the week here on Bronx Bombers comes from Steve in Jackson Heights. And by the way, the email is joe@bronxbomberspodcast.com, or you can find us on Twitter @BombersPodcast is the handle, or give us a call at 646-854-4959. If you have any questions you want to have us answer on any future episodes, we are more than happy to do so. And Steve writes, I liked your segment on the 2000 Yankees. People always say it's the hottest teams that do well in the playoffs, but doesn't that 2000 team prove the opposite since they were so cold? And as far as winning the wild card game against Oakland, how much do you think home field really matters? Well, thanks for those questions, Steve. Both very important. You hear a lot of cliches thrown around in baseball, some with some basis to them and others not. And Steve brings up one, the cliche that the hot teams at the end of the regular season do well in the playoffs. But again, I don't consider the wild card game a playoff game. It's a play-in game. And honestly, a one-and-done game like that, I think you can throw September record out the window. In 9 innings of baseball, literally anything can and will happen. The worst team in baseball this year is the Orioles. They have been just absolutely horrendous with a winning percentage of .286. They've lost 106 games already and are currently 53 games under 500. And yet, twice this year, they beat the Red Sox, a team that's already won 103 games. So these things do happen, but I did a little research on Steve's question, and as far as home field, what I did there, I went back and looked at every one-and-done game in Major League history. So that includes tiebreakers, and that includes play-in games. The play-in games started in 2012. Now, as far as tiebreakers, back in the day, it was kind of weird. They didn't really have a set tiebreaker system. Some seasons they did do one and dones, but some seasons they also did 3-game series. Probably the most famous of those was the 1951 3-game series between the Giants and the Dodgers that ended with Bobby Thompson's famous home run at the Polo Grounds. But I only looked at single-game tiebreakers and play-in games. Going back to 1948, that was the first one when the Indians beat the Red Sox at Fenway, and then there was the one in 1978 that I saw where the Yankees also beat the Red Sox at Fenway, all the way up to last year's wild card play-in games. So that was the Yankees against the Twins and the Rockies against the Diamondbacks. And what I found out was, as far as home field, Steve, it held absolutely no advantage. In those 22 one-and-done games, the away team won 12 times, the home team won 10. And just looking at recent history with the Yankees, we had home field back in 2015, and it did us absolutely no good against the Astros with a very hot Dallas Keuchel on the mound. So for all the sweating that we've been doing about whether or not the Yankees get home field in this game against Oakland on October 3rd, the truth is it probably doesn't really matter. Now, as far as Steve's other question about, the 2000 Yankees, proving that who's hot in September is irrelevant, first of all, 2000, it's just 1 year. So out of, over a century of baseball, that doesn't prove anything. But, here, I looked at every team that's played a wild card play-in game since 2012 when they started doing it. So that's 4 teams per year, 2 in each league, for a total of 24 teams. And I compiled each of those 24 teams' one-loss records starting September 1st to the end of the season in which they played that wild card game. And here, there may be a shred, barely a shred of truth to the cliche that who's hot stays hot. The 12 teams that won those play-in games since 2012 had an average winning percentage in September of .571, and the 12 losers had a September winning percentage of .563. But to me, that's only 8 percentage points of difference. So that's, to me, it's statistically insignificant. So again, in a one-and-done playoff game, you have literally nothing to hang your hat on as far as who has an advantage going in. Home field means nothing historically, nor does the team's records over the last month of the season. The Astros team that beat us in 2015 had a winning percentage of .433 that September, a losing record. I mean, they were absolutely ice cold coming into that game. And, of all the teams I looked at that have played these wild card play-in games, the team with the best September winning percentage out of all of them was the 2013 Indians with a .778 win percentage. They were scorching hot that September, going 21-6, and yet they lost to the Rays. Alex Cobb shut them out. So, that's why you want to avoid these games whenever possible, is the fact that anything can and will happen. So, Steve, when it comes to who will prevail on October 3rd, it's really anyone's guess. I mean, you basically just grab a seat with your beverage of choice, prepare for a white-knuckle ride, and just hope for the best. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Bronx Bombers. Again, don't forget, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, find us on Spotify, follow us on Twitter @BombersPodcast is the handle, like us on Facebook as well, but most of all, have faith in the Yankees. We'll see you again next week.